Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today in this Ventures On-Site webinar. We appreciate you being on board. We have a lot to talk about. My name's Phil Higgins, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so, where we will review the construction activity throughout the GCC and Egyptian markets to see the progress so far this year, and to ask the question, has the recovery started? We are very pleased to have a great panel of professionals with us today. Joining us from RMJM, we have George Arvanitis, their lead design manager, Mr. Jason Langer, the managing director at Robert Bird, and Scot Coombes, the managing partner at Aesg. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and we do look forward to talking with you shortly. Well, it's been a very interesting time for us all. I say interesting, but I'm sure you all realize that I really mean a very difficult time. This past 12 months have exposed us to a very difficult world that has affected all of us, both personally and professionally. COVID-19 brought a major shift to the pace of the construction activity in the region. I say the region, but it's the same worldwide. But fortunately, we did see in this region construction sites remain open, but the pace of that construction activity did slow. Consultants continued to design projects in 2020, but there was a dramatic reduction to the amount of project awards throughout the region, and we'll have a look at some of those numbers shortly. Many are optimistic that we will begin to see an upswing this year, and yet some remain cautiously concerned that the volume of business is not going to be seen for some time. And so I hope today that we can help at least begin to understand if there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm sure in our discussion with our panel today, we will see where the markets are moving, which some of the markets throughout the GCC are moving, and some have been a little bit slow to move again. And I'm sure that they will help us to understand that further. During the course of this webinar, we'd like you to send in questions. We're not going to have the traditional questions at the end of the webinar. I'm simply going to make a very brief presentation as to some of the construction activity throughout the region. And then I have a series of questions that I'll be asking the panel, no one in particular. It'll be just an open discussion from the four of us. And we would really appreciate if you could send in some questions. They may be directed openly to the panel, or you may have a specific question that you would like to ask one of our panel. So please use the Q&A section there on the platform. Send us your questions so that we can do our best to answer them. I'd really like to say a special thanks to Optimaz, our sponsor for this webinar. Optimaz is a specialized digital marketing agency specializing for the construction industry and providing an outsourced service to support business functions for marketing and lead generations activity. Optimaz understands the construction industry and can help you identify the most relevant strategy and resources to grow the pipeline for your business. And I'm sure that that's something that we all need right now to reinvigorate our market activity. Optimaz provides a range of marketing services, and I'm sure the team at Optimaz will help you move forward with very positive presence in today's market. So look out for Optimaz. It is part of the Ventures Middle East group of companies, and so very much associated with us here at Ventures On-Site. I would like to make a very brief presentation on the construction activity, because it's very interesting for us to begin to see what is happening as a macro view of the construction activity throughout the region, just to put us into a little bit of a frame of mind. So that the real GDP growth for the GCC region by country, showing here the 2021 forecast. It was expected that the UAE will bounce back with 3.1%. KSA 2.9, Qatar 2.4, Kuwait very low at 0.7, although we are seeing some construction activity in Kuwait, specifically in the oil and gas sector. Oman still struggling with a 1.8 expected growth rate, and Bahrain at 3.3. It's always interesting to track the crude oil price, especially when we talk about construction activity in this region. Dictating the activity that we see in construction is the price of oil. And in 2020, because of the pandemic and the recessed, depressed markets that we all experienced, we did see that dramatic fall in the oil price to 41.47 average for the year. But since then, we've seen steady increase, and today we are sitting around the $63 mark, and that's considered to be healthy. There is expectation that that will continue to rise as we move forward. So for the construction awards, and this is something that we're all interested in. So we have three numbers here for each of the markets. The light blue is the 2020 number. This is the construction awards that we saw in 2020. And the darker blue is what has been forecast or expected to be awarded in 2021. And the yellow there is what we have currently seen in the market as per contractor awards. So the value of the projects that have been awarded. You can see there, we're sort of mid-year. It's a little bit less than the year, but we are behind pace in the UAE. We are behind pace in KSA. We are behind the pace in we're not really behind the pace in Qatar, because there has been some fairly major oil and gas awards in that region. Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain all lower than the expected annual number. One of the reasons for this webinar is to understand, is the second half going to be a catch-up period of time? From what we're seeing in just the recent weeks, that very much could be the case. So let's break that. I'd like to break these numbers down by industry. Many people that join our webinar are construction industry related. Our panel are very much involved in the construction industry, so the construction of buildings, but included in our numbers is oil and gas construction activity, which in some regions is very significant. As I said earlier, in Qatar, their numbers for construction award is very high, but that's relevant to some major oil and gas activity from the beginning of this year. And so oil and gas is pushing ahead quite strongly. Industrial activity is below pace significantly. And here we see the construction activity. Well, this is the concern for me. Year to date, we're sitting around 15 million with an expectation that there will be 15 billion and 39 billion construction award this year. And so we're looking to see what's going to happen in this second half of the year. Water and power, although we've seen some significant award for water and power in Saudi Arabia, it's still below the expected pace. And infrastructure, again, is below. I mean, significantly less than 1/2 of what is expected for the year. We've said in previous webinars and from the message that we received from our panels in the past, infrastructure will be a driving force to see the recovery. And concerningly, we're not seeing enough of that infrastructure activity so far this year. So some of the top clients who have awarded projects to contractors in the entire region, the top 5, Qatar Petroleum, and this is because of that major award in Qatar for the gas project. Then we have the Royal Commission in Riyadh, so that's pushing forward. Kuwait Oil Company, KOC, they've moved forward with some major project awards this year. Saudi Aramco is there, and the Saudi Water Partnership Company. So you can see here that of the top awards throughout the region, most are oil and gas related. So clients who have announced building projects in the region. So the Royal Commission in Riyadh City, they've been very prominently positioned to date. The Red Sea Development Company with several awards associated to the Red Sea development. The Public Investment Fund in KSA, PIF. And so the top three are all in Saudi Arabia. Then Aldar Properties move up into the 4th position, and Diriyah Gate Development Authority in KSA, very prominent in the last few months. And so of the top 5, 4 are in KSA and 1 is in the UAE. Very interesting to have a look at that, because I'm sure that KSA will become a strong focus during the rest of our discussions today. Top contractors who have won major projects: Al Bawani Company in Saudi Arabia, FiberX Construction Group in the UAE. This is quite interesting because these are contractors that have been prominent in winning awards so far this year, okay? And so, while a lot of the construction activity is focused in Saudi Arabia, some of these project contractors are in UAE based. And so FiberX Construction Company, Intermas Engineering Contracting Company, Freysinet Limited in Saudi Arabia, and Arabian Construction Company, ACC, in the UAE. So these UAE companies have picked up some major project activity in the region. So that's. I told you it was going to be a very brief presentation. We don't want to labor you with lots of numbers, because we do want to get a feel as to what's happening throughout the region. And so joining us today is our panel, and I've asked each of them to just bring a short introduction to their company and what they are doing in the region, some of the regions where they're working in. And I'd like to hand over to George Arvanitis, and please correct me. It's not a difficult Greek name, but it's definitely better than Zographopoulos, who was my friend at school. So correct me if I'm wrong there, George. But
I'll just tweak it a little bit for you. So it's Arvanitis, but
Arvanitis. I was over pronouncing something there. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and please give us a little bit of an introduction as to what your company is involved in today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for reliving my trauma of childhood, roll call. But thank you. Thank you very much, Phil and the panel. It's very great to be here. I mean, we're still on webinars, which is, I guess, a symptom of the times. But hopefully we can get more kind of live events and engagement. However, I think there's some good things, at least for us, that came out of last year. It hasn't been all doom and gloom, really. We've had to find really new ways of working together. We've had to really look at our skill set and our teams and our digital platforms, and how do we kind of visually communicate to our clients. So I think, we work with other companies, just Scot's company in particular, Aesg, quite a lot. And so we kind of get to know each other a little bit, which helps even though you're working remotely. I just want to share a few slides just on our side, and just do that. So if everyone doesn't know about RMJM has been around for a while. Actually, one of the first design practices registered in the UAE, but really founded about 60 years ago. We have around 27 studios, around 2,000 people internationally, a number of, obviously, quite a number of built projects, awards. We've recently just established our Riyadh and our strengthened our Dubai studio and Abu Dhabi studio, obviously because of the kind of mandate to kind of start to kind of have much more of a strengthened role in the kingdom. We've kind of had to really kind of assert ourselves as a kind of regional hub as well in Riyadh. So, which enables us to talk to our clients quite directly and so forth. So we are obviously focused in the Middle East, but yet we touch on North Africa and the eastern region of Africa and also Europe. But we are kind of let's say the regional hub here for the GCC. Just go to the next slide. Just a snapshot of some of the key projects. Obviously, 1956, we've been established, and actually the beginnings in Medina and Jeddah, doing some of the first kind of master plans for the kingdom. In fact, we have a lot of the old books here in the office, which are lovely to see, really hand drawing the drawings and so forth. And actually talking to clients, and in fact, it's been a welcome surprise when we talk to our clients and potential clients, especially in looking at some of the planning projects, some of the old guard, at least, that they remember, then they recall some of the early beginnings of RMJM in the kingdom. So it's been a kind of really nice story to have, to be able to present, along with how to address the contemporary nature of development. Some of the key projects just on the boards right now, we've been re-looking at DIFC, re-looking at the public realm. This is the top project on the left. Re-looking at hospitality, we've been involved in the first packages for King Abdulaziz Boulevard, or Road rather, in Mecca. So re-looking at the kind of renewed tourism offer, new hospitality projects, new kind of mixed use residential projects that are happening in Abu Dhabi and upcoming. Recently delivered the W Hotel in the Palm, and really one of our really kind of exciting places now we're starting to look at is RAC, and really starting to think about what is the nature of leisure and recreation and hospitality that's fitting for the Emirate. So that's some of the exciting work we have kind of going on at the moment. Just to let you know, I mean, as we mentioned, you know, we are very much connected to the design community. We are situated in D3. We are very much feeding off the whole synergy of the creative industry in D3, and that's very important as a brand, and also in terms of how we kind of look through the lens of creativity that we look at as a multidisciplinary thing. So we have alliances with academic institutions, other parallel creative industries, and so forth. But you know, being able to kind of say that we are in D3, and being able to kind of say that we are this kind of in this landmark place, this hub of design is really a great thing to say to clients as well. So anyway, that's us on RMJM. So looking forward to this year. We have recently just started hiring again, and we are really excited about that. We're getting a lot of new talent. We are getting also exciting new projects. Also in the kingdom, we've been looking at Kuwait quite a lot. We've been looking at Libya. We've been looking at also Iraq, I think, as well. So a lot of the kind of ramping up of development there is some of our emerging markets that we've been tuned to. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to, I guess, Scott.
Well, I look forward to you exploring a little bit more about the Ras Al Khaimah. I live in Ras Al Khaimah. We don't want too much development in Ras Al Khaimah. I don't want it to become another Dubai, but it is a great place, and it is a developing region in the Northern Emirates here in the UAE. Jason, why don't you give us a little bit of an update as to what's happening there at Robert Bird?
Thanks, Philip. I don't have a big presentation or anything to share. I guess briefly, as a bit of background, Robert Bird Group are structural and civil and construction engineers globally. We've been established in the Middle East since 2003, when we worked on the Emirates terminal of Dubai Airport with Al Nabooda Laing O'Rourke. So we've been around for a while and seen a few market cycles. And this one is unique and presents its own challenges. And I guess what we're seeing at the moment is really just a change in where the work is and what the work is. Oil and gas is definitely back. And I guess Dubai has had an amazing run over the last sort of decade in property projects, and we're seeing the completion of some amazing projects at the moment. We just finished recently ICD Brookfield Place with Brookfield, amazing job. Scott's company worked on that as well. An amazing tower, and interestingly, you know, Brookfield are seeing really good take up of the office space, even though it's a premium building at premium prices. So there are tenants and there are good clients. That usual in bad times, there tends to be or challenging times, there tends to be a flight to quality. We're seeing that a little bit in the market again, but it's very much a case of where are you in the Middle East is going to determine the nature of the work. So we're, as a consulting engineering company, we're involved both in buildings and property projects and infrastructure projects. And depending on where you are in the Middle East, we're seeing very different directions of travel. Dubai, I think, is pretty flat at the moment across infrastructure and property, but we are starting to see a build-up of infrastructure projects coming through in Dubai as probably the next wave that will then drive a future property wave that will come after that. And that's going to give Dubai time to get over the current sort of oversupply it's got in a lot of sectors of the property market. Meanwhile, Abu Dhabi is carrying on pretty well. They've got lots of projects in the pipeline. They're pushing forward. Oil prices recovering in the last 6 months has certainly helped them with their budgets and is driving a lot of that activity. And there's still nation building projects happening in Abu Dhabi as well. Lots of stuff at Saadiyat Island that's going to keep consultants and contractors busy. But the biggest chunk of property projects and that are in design at the moment is definitely in Saudi Arabia, particularly the Public Investment Fund with its various projects has a really aggressive vision of what it wants to achieve by 2030 and the national plan of the Saudi government, the Saudi leaders. And they're really pushing with that energy and enthusiasm that I think everyone has come to know in the region at the moment. And that's where there's huge opportunity, both in infrastructure projects and in property projects for consultants and contractors alike. What they want to actually deliver goes well above and beyond the local capacity. So they need the region to help them deliver. And that's the opportunity, I think, that exists for all of us.
You and I have spoken often about the project activity, and we've always focused on the UAE. Is Robert Bird involved in other markets? I know you're strongly focused here, but are you in other regions?
Look, our head office in this region is still in Dubai, but to be honest now, our project workload is probably something like 50% in KSA. And then in the UAE, the vast majority of our projects are actually in Abu Dhabi. And then we've got some project work now in Oman. In the last 12 months, we've picked up work in Oman that's going, and that continues to grow. And we've been active in Kuwait for a while, and that continues to be quite stable. And to be honest, the only sort of GCC country where we're not really active at the moment is Qatar and Bahrain. But at the moment, the project opportunity between Abu Dhabi and KSA is actually keeping us so busy. We're just trying to focus on that and, do a great job for our clients rather than try and do everything for everybody.
Very good. Thanks, Jason. Scott, over to you. The man of the moment. You guys have been picking up so many awards in the last 12 months. And I'd really like you to tell us about what your company is doing today. But why don't you run through some of these awards that you've been able to secure, not just in the Middle East. I mean, these are international awards, which is tremendous for Aesg.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much, obviously, for having us join you on the discussion today. I think it's definitely been a very interesting sort of 18 months or 12 months for most of us in the business. I actually think Jason put it pretty well there that, sort of looking at sort of where the market opportunities sort of lie. And sort of, I'm aware that a number of firms are starting to sort of pick up momentum again as well, which I think is quite good across the board. Perhaps to kind of run you through just, in a nutshell, kind of who we are, and then perhaps talk a little bit about some of the projects and things and what we sort of see happening in the market. I suppose, first of all, my name's Scott. I co-founded Aesg in 2011 with Saeed Alabar. It's a firm that we started in Dubai and to date has grown to about 135 people at the moment, and we're continuing to look to continue with that growth. We're up about 40% already in 2021, so it's and that's in headcount, and we're about 35% increase as well in revenue. So definitely we are sort of on a sort of a growth trajectory, and that's really off the back of probably I would say three things. I would say the first of those is definitely related to geographic expansion. The second of those would be related to I think growth and capabilities. And the third of those would be looking to actually introduce acquisitions. And so we actually acquired a firm last year, and it's something we are looking at more into the future as well. In terms of what we do, and perhaps that is maybe part of the reason for our growth, and perhaps despite COVID, you know, having sort of the success that we've seen, I think perhaps relies in or sits on some of the services that we offer. We're a specialist consultant. We're not about being sort of a large, sort of more commoditized engineering firm. We're very much about being a specialist services provider. With that, though, we are also multidisciplinary. So, you know, what we're about is things like building performance, sustainable design, facade engineering, fire and life safety, parametric design, digital design tools, and trying to be a little bit of a think tank, I suppose, for the design and the construction industry. And I think that's been in part sort of led to, I suppose, a degree of maybe a bit of agility over the past 12 months. We're certainly a very, very hungry firm, very ambitious, very driven, perhaps quite youthful as well. And I think with that, that's also led to a lot of the decisions we've been making over the past 12 months about getting back to the coalface and getting straight back into projects as quickly as possible, but also pushing the business as well, rather than worrying too much or becoming too distracted by what will the market look like in 2023 or 2024. You know, while we have sort of an overview of where we're looking to get to over the next 5 years, we're very much about what's happening in the now as well. You know, looking a lot more about our sort of short-term goals. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, sort of who we are, I guess, where we are. In terms of geographies, we expanded into Singapore this year, so we opened a Singapore office. We have a base in London, which we've had now for about 4 years. And we've also been in Riyadh for about the last 4 years as well. Project-wise, it's a very interesting split of probably where we are at the moment. If I stay specific to the Middle East, similar to what Jason said and Robert Bird, I mean, we're about 45% of our business, almost 50% of our business and revenue now coming from Saudi Arabia. The other sort of 45%, 40% coming from the UAE, and then the remainder sort of spread across Oman, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and now also more recently in Egypt as well. Really where the opportunities are the bigger opportunities are coming from, it is definitely in Saudi Arabia through the PIF entities that you mentioned earlier. To maybe talk a little bit about some of the projects, I mean, particularly in Dubai, as Jason mentioned as well, ICD Brookfield Place, a lovely project which has recently been completed. One that we had heavy involvement going right back to almost the sort of pre-concept stages. That was actually one of the projects that helped trigger our sort of involvement and move into the UK market as well, when Foster and Partners were sort of requesting more and more meetings to be held in London, despite the whole project team being in Dubai. Along with that, things like One Zabeel as well, also being involved with DIFC Gate Avenue, Expo 2020. There's still been a lot going on, so we're involved with the Sustainability Pavilion, the UAE Pavilion, along with a number of other smaller country-specific pavilions. There's also the CL Tower, which you may have seen. So CL Tower is this very impressive sort of cold bent, will be the tallest hotel in the world. Just now started construction in the marina. That was a project where we really put our best foot forwards in terms of parametric design, digital design, to deliver, I suppose, the cold bent facade that's on there. And then in KSA, a lot of work and a lot of projects with the, I suppose, the PIF entities. So NEOM, Red Sea, Amala, Diriyah has been a very significant project for us in 2021, where we're seeing a lot of growth. And along with that, some of the others we are exploring as well, whether that's in terms of Qiddiya, where we're working on a couple of projects there as well. And they're a big scale projects. You know, they're not mega projects, they're giga projects, as people are calling them, and it's very true. So that's kind of a bit about sort of what we're doing in the Middle East. Even in the UK, we have been growing a lot, and the headcount's been growing there as well. We've been supporting the government with the rollout of a lot of the post-Grenfell fire in 2017, the sort of fire inspection work, auditing work, and then the recladding design work. So that's been a growth sector for us. As well as that, also net zero is seriously trending in 2021. And we are obviously quite well positioned as a business for consultancy advisory services in terms of net zero and converting existing assets or existing portfolios towards net zero. And that's an area which we're definitely seeing a lot of growth inquiries, more inquiries coming through from as well. So yeah, hopefully that covers it.
Thank you so much. I know you guys have been like extremely busy in 2020. So the rest of the world's in panic mode. Construction sites are slowing. We weren't really seeing a lot of construction award last year, but you were very active in designing projects that you had in hand, but you're also securing new projects, correct?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think, for us in terms of a business model, perhaps one of the reasons we were maybe less hard hit is that as a specialist, people are engaging us to come in and help solve problems, solve challenges. And what that leads to is we tend to be brought onto a large volume of projects. So compared to sort of more sort of core engineering services, let's say pure structures, pure MEP or architecture, where a large firm may at any particular point in time be working on, a handful, 10, 20 projects. We have over 100, 150 live projects at any point in time. So while there was an adaptation in the market when COVID happened, a lot of things were shelved or were adjusted. There was still, I suppose one project, is not really or doesn't necessarily have to have too much of a significant impact to our bottom line. Whereas perhaps for an architect, it can have a very, very significant impact if that's a core, complex, heavy resource project.
Jason,
so
what about you?
Yeah.
Did you see that same sort of activity in 2020 there at Robert Bird?
We did, to be honest. I have to give some credit to the Middle East in general, because I sit on a few sort of global business groups for Robert Bird Group. So I get to see how Australia responded to the pandemic, and Asia and the UK and Europe and all these other places. And I must admit, I actually think the Middle East adapted to the pandemic and digital and remote working faster, and the clients adapted, and the whole actual supply chain as a whole adapted faster to the pandemic than anywhere else in the world. It was incredible how quick everybody just realized you had to have Zoom or Teams, and actually you could meet and you could deliver these projects without meeting each other face to face. And there was a really, the Middle East has always been quite bold in adapting new anything. So with this digital platform shift, it was a very short period of time, and all of a sudden we were doing site inspections remotely, meetings with clients remotely, fee discussions and tenders remotely, and it was very quick, and life was going on and projects were being delivered, and it was business as unusual, but it was still business. And I think, kudos to the whole Middle Eastern industry and clients in particular for just realizing that this can be done and jumping on board and doing it. To be honest, the biggest challenge that Robert Bird Group had at the back end of 2020 was that our largest client at the time was Arabtech. I probably don't need to say anything else in that regard, but we've managed to move on and find other great clients who enjoy us. And like anything, when you have these challenges in the marketplace, Arabtech had an incredible amount of amazing people within that organisation, and with what's happened there, those people have gone and found other homes to continue their careers. And what we found is now there are 10 new client organisations for every one we had previously, because we now have people who respect what we do in 10 other client organisations. So, and eventually these challenges turn around and you can get some advantage out of it. So it's not all bad.
George, did RMJM see significant new awards themselves last year?
I mean, as kind of Scott said, we don't have the privilege of sitting having that kind of we're really kind of driven by the market. Obviously, we are kind of a design consultancy. So it was challenging, we can say, but what we really pivoted to is kind of making sure that we had very good partners. in our project. So Scott mentioned the IFC. We did a lot of the public realm and from concept to supervision for DIFC Gate Avenue. So the really important thing was trying to understand really the meaning of placemaking and what that means to kind of the setting of buildings and thinking about how, what is the value of the environment that we like to be in. And I think last year, really, we had to kind of retool it and start to think about what does it mean to kind of be outside? What does it mean? How do you can kind of humanize some of these things? So, we look to companies like Aesg or WDI or any of these other helpful partners that can kind of start to kind of calibrate and engineer the types of environments we'd like to deliver. And that's a very important thing for the kingdom, for KSA. It's also an important thing. I mean, the Gadan program in Abu Dhabi, unfortunately, was a little bit, went to a little bit of a standstill, but it was a very kind of visionary program that really looked at streetscape and the value of streetscape. And if anything, the COVID experience last year really kind of challenged us to rethink about how we would like to live and what are the meaning and the value of the buildings that we deliver. What is the quality of our environment? What are the things that we'd like to have within easy access? And really, it's for us. It's not kind of being in isolation about thinking about these problems, but it's really connecting up with people like Scott and Jason in terms of how do we start to look at this greater challenge. And it could be the challenge of the 15-minute kind of urban district, or it could be expanded all the way up to Amala or any of these kind of grand projects. And NEOM is particularly one as well. So I think what we had to do is we kind of rethink a little bit what our partners are, who do we bring to the table, and how do we kind of create a kind of unified offer. So it's not just the architecture, it's not just pretty buildings, but it's actually a kind of meaningful environment that we'd like to deliver, and how do we engineer that? And that's been a positive, I think, last year. And I think we've done, as many architectural consultancies and design consultancies, an awful lot of kind of business development. We've listened to our clients more. We've started to look at local partners. We started to try to kind of understand the region in which we were delivering. So, and you see these in projects like Alula, just going back to PIF, and yes, Russell Kema as well, because we're working with RAC Properties at the moment, having discussions about what does it mean to be there. Like, and we don't want to deliver Marbella, we don't want to deliver, Spanish kind of resort town in the kingdom. We want to kind of grow the architecture from the place. So we've really had to kind of start to dig deeper and start to create kind of more meaningful architecture. And I think that's been a welcome and positive thing.
So, in 2020, my point is that you were very busy. So you were all actively designing, you were securing new projects. The construction pace slowed because there was significantly less construction award. And even if there was a construction award, an extended period of mobilization because of the situation that we were in, correct? Of the projects that you were designing last year, have they moved forward to the tender stage, or are they still sitting on a plate waiting for some action?
Well, it's varied. I think, like, if you look at projects like that take place in Diriyah Gate, and largely it's been a lot about reorganization from the client side in terms of procurement. A lot of the projects that we bid for, you would have shifting ground in terms of who actually are the client entities and who are the actual client body. So that's been a shifting challenge, which has affected the whole tendering process. I think it has been a challenge that we couldn't be there. We couldn't directly talk to the client teams, and we could actually directly engage. So things had to be filtered a bit remotely. So there has been some lag about it. However, we've had now, just I would say in the last 3 months, a lot of projects that have been in standstill for like months for PIF or whomever, come to fruition. So I think that's
is that the same for you, Jason? Have you seen the same in your activities?
It's been, like George, it's been a mixed bag. I guess I'll talk through a few extremes. We've worked on a couple of projects where the architectural vision and the client's brief for the project was quite ambitious. And those projects have gone through concept design and into scheme design. And then the client has basically reconsidered the budget and sort of not cut their aspirations, but certainly cut their budgets. And those jobs basically have gone backwards in design, back to scheme design to meet a new budget. And I think there was almost an over exuberance of client activity and expectation last year in terms of the budgets they would have to play with. And I think what we've seen in 2021 is clients have come to the realization that some of their budgets have to be a little bit more realistic, and that realism is now flowing back into the designs. And in a lot of cases, and I would actually say something like 30 to 40% of the projects we worked on last year, essentially the concept design and scheme design phase is being redone on the basis of new client budgets and new client expectations. And that has essentially delayed tenders going out for construction for anything from 6 to 9 months. So if there are contractors out there sitting there thinking, I was expecting to tender huge amounts of work at the first half of 2021, where is it all? It's probably in redesign, and it's probably going to come out in Q3 or Q4. So it's coming, but it's late because the level of, I guess, budget oversight on a lot of projects has really increased in the last 6 to 9 months.
Has the price of raw materials affected that? We've seen significant price increase in steel.
Yes.
We've seen price increase for wood, glass, aluminium. Everything except cement, I think, has gone up. Cement's gone down, but that's because we have excess production capacity here.
And cement is starting to become a dirty word because with Scott's point about carbon net zero becoming the next big thing, concrete is probably the dirtiest material you can build out of, and so the challenge is on to either take concrete out of your building or come up or use what they're talking about, earth-friendly concretes and all the rest of it, which exist, but we still haven't come to the right point in terms of knowing how best to incorporate those into projects. So, to your point, is the cost of raw materials changing things? Absolutely, it's putting even more pressure on those budgets, which is driving more design. We're watching projects stall or be cancelled purely on the basis of steel price alone. Reinforcement bar cost has gone up 40% this calendar year already, and all of the contractors who signed their contracts before the beginning of this year and have fixed price contracts to deliver are potentially in a world of trouble. So so if you need a good structural engineer who knows how to optimize reinforcement design, please give me a call. But there are some big challenges for the whole industry this year as a result.
Well, I've heard that Scot Coombes is the master of value engineering. Scott, do you want to jump in here?
Thanks. I don't know if I'm the master of value engineering, but I mean, I know one thing that has been sort of driving reduction in materials or improved efficiency has been sort of a pursuit of better rationalization. In material use, in design, in reduced wastage as well. And things like parametrics are becoming more and more commonplace in the engineering office to actually cut down material wastage and find more efficient ways to build equally strong structures. I think there's a couple of bits I'd like to add on sort of what's just been said. I think I think Jason was right in sort of talking about a lot of things going back to kind of redesign. Maybe revisiting sort of concepts and so on. I mean, the reality is that when you're in construction on a project and you're halfway through, it's very difficult to stop and go back to the drawing board. During a design, obviously that's much lower cost. The other thing is design is obviously a lot cheaper than construction. And I think that's an important point for Saudi Arabia because at the moment, what we're seeing in Saudi is an awful lot of design going on, not necessarily so much construction. And I've always been a bit of a believer that there is, in the Middle East market, a bit of an out of sync wave where you have design happening and design booming, and then design can flatten off or taper off a little bit, and then construction booms perhaps a year or 18 months or so later. And I would say definitely at the moment, we're in one of those growth cycles again for design work, not in construction. And I would say if you are, in sort of the supply chain or within the contractor's realm of services, it's a difficult time. And naturally, it's going to be very, very competitive as a result. And I think that's what leads to the conclusion of, that there is this push in driving pricing down for construction. Clients need to, but also, the contractors are needing to, because it's a very, very competitive market at the moment, given that there's not so much construction work out there. In terms of the design work though, and all of us on this call are quite fortunate to be, I guess, a little bit versatile with our offering, in that we can work both in the design stage, but also then support as well, through construction. And that allows us to be a little bit more, I guess, adaptive, in terms of where we can add value, throughout that sort of design process and construction process. But definitely,
do you feel that this is going to affect the way specification and vendor approval process is going to happen in that design stage? Architects always like to say, I would like this particular product, but is that going to be more fluid in the future? Is there any comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think it would be more fluid. I think it would be, again, perhaps quite competitive. And I think there will be an expectation on design to budget. And I think that's something that we're seeing, sort of come about more and more, which is leading to a little bit more necessity for perhaps a cost consultant to be more heavily involved in the design process, both from the architect side and on the engineering side as well. I think there is that side of it, but I think as well, I mean, more than perhaps looking at the supply chain, I think it comes down to I think the types of projects we'll be looking at will probably evolve a little bit, perhaps be less ultra luxury and glamorous. I mean, one thing when you were sharing your presentation earlier, you were kind of looking at the different sectors where where sort of there has been sort of growth, and where there's expected to be growth, and you're sort of packaging buildings together as a whole. And the reality is that, I think retail and hospitality, there's definitely going to be a drop at the moment. You'd have to be a brave man or woman to go out and build a hotel, at the moment, assuming that, the world will go back to normal in a year or two. But building something for more domestic populations, I think is something that's very, very logical. And that's a lot of the focus really for Saudi Arabia as well. But in terms of supply chain, in terms of procurement, I think it will just be competitive at the moment, particularly on the construction side of things, until the next section of that wave catches up, where our redesign work is then being retendered out to the market.
There was a question that was sent in earlier with regard to the repurposing and refurbishment of some projects. I would put also into this discussion in UAE and Qatar with the Expo and the FIFA is over. I mean, that's not too far away, right? When that is over, are you any of you starting to see some project considerations coming for the repurposing of some of these project developments in these regions?
Yes.
Jason?
Yeah, we're seeing...
Jump in here, because we're very curious to hear.
We are seeing a global, this is not just the Middle East, this is actually global. We're seeing a global move where, given the pandemic and people realize now they can work remotely, the office space requirements of your average company is reducing. So say a company previously needed 10,000 square feet of office space. They're in the process of convincing themselves, or they have convinced themselves, they only need 6,000 square feet of office space now, so they can give that other 4,000 square foot back. What that's meaning is there's actually a glut of office space that's going to gradually turn up on the world's doorstep. And what it will happen is that rather than having lots of empty space in every building around the world, people will gradually move to the best buildings. And what you'll find is the worst office buildings in the world will end up being empty, and the owners of those buildings will need to do something else with them. So we're already engaged in conversations with clients globally and in the Middle East to take poor performing commercial assets, poor performing retail assets, and work out how can they be used for something else, anything else that can actually generate an income and be valuable in the modern world with the way the world is going to go. So we are expecting to see and already seeing office to retail conversions, office to storage conversions, office to data center conversions is the latest one we're looking at the moment. Retail to data center, like all sorts of weird and wonderful conversions of one building type to the other, and also life extension. Dubai in particular has gotten to the point where there's a whole stack now of 30-year-old buildings that have probably got 10 or 20 years of design life left in them. But people, again, going back to this carbon zero concept, to demolish those buildings and build a new building is a huge impact on the environment. If those buildings, if their life can be extended, you don't have to demolish them. You can adaptively reuse them. There's massive benefits both to the asset owner and to the overall city and the environment. So we're seeing a lot of people starting to look at that as the next wave of projects in the more established centres, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc., and even in Riyadh.
Is this current activity that you're seeing from your Dubai office? Do you have clients that are coming to you with these project requirements?
Yes.
Same for you, Scott. Yep. Are you seeing this at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jason summed it up well. But there is, in the Middle East, particularly in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, there is now an aging building stock. At times, perhaps not even 30 years old. Even 15 years old. That is now, going back and in need of some degree of retrofit and refurbishment. And I think there is a massive potential there. We are getting inquiries there. We are doing some work in that space. And it's coming from multiple angles. For instance, I don't know if this is confidential or not, but I'll say it anyway. We're working on a project in the UK, which is with the National Health Service, which is a pathway to net zero across multiple hospitals in the UK, throughout the UK. And it's all about re-gearing that kind of existing building stock within the National Health Service towards net zero. That's coming in the Middle East as well, where there will be drivers there, particularly if you own an existing building and you're looking to reduce energy consumption and energy retrofit on that building. There are very interesting, very attractive loans and structures and models which are available now to come in and retrofit, let's say, the MEP in that building, but also repurposing. And that actually ties back to, again, another point Jason said earlier, but which was kind of moving away from concrete. Actually using steel in a building is much better in terms of versatility, also much better in terms of recyclability of that building in the future as well. I wouldn't be surprised if longer term in the future, we actually see people acquiring buildings, steel buildings, for the raw materials that are contained within those buildings, simply for the ability to repurpose them. That's something that has happened in the States already, where particularly industrial buildings as well, the value in the raw materials in those buildings is actually higher than the actual plot of the building itself. So there is definitely sort of a lot of opportunity, I think, in that kind of existing building space. We recently started something on a large project in Abu Dhabi, which is again to kind of take that back and sort of revisit the whole building performance across that. And there's something we've looked at as well in retail in Dubai, where there's also inevitably, there's a lot of people that have been moving out, and retail looking at how can we repurpose the buildings to some degree.
One of our attendees today for this webinar, Sundar, has asked, is it possible for us to quantify the repurposing market in the GCC? I mean, it's a very difficult question, Sundar. I don't think anyone really has the answer to it. It was just something that was raised because we were talking with an architectural consultant last week at the Construction Technology Forum, and they highlighted this point. The pandemic has changed the way that we look at business, and often that stimulates different activities that we never really gave much thought to. And so it is something that I think we're all coming to grips with, and something that needs to be very much associated too. If you have a particular product that you are marketing, then next time you're speaking to a consultant to get specified, throw this out there, see what they're talking about, see what projects they're working on. Instead of just the big high-rise towers, maybe there are some other project sectors that you've not normally been associated or connected with. There's another question here from Innes. He says that he works for a carpet company, and even though, he said, how do you explain, although the hospitality industry is almost saturated, to the exception of KSA, UAE remains the leading investor in hotel construction in the next 3 to 4 years. I'm not really quite sure about that, but are you guys seeing any activity in the hotel sector? Are companies still talking about building new hotels in the UAE?
Yeah, I mean, just on our side, I mean, going back to your home, we've been looking at and a little bit, just touching a little bit on what Scott was saying. I mean, some of the hospitality market just has been evolving in terms of people rethinking about what is my catchment, what is my renewed catchment. It's not necessarily the international visitor, but it's actually the regional tourism offer as well. And where can I go for the weekend? Where can I go for that short getaway? And that means that hospitality mix has really had to be retooled. I mean, some of the work that we're actually looking at some of the kind of regional tourism resorts that are south from the Red Sea, where it's these new resort towns which are looking to regenerate and bring employment to the western coast and eastern coast of the kingdom, where they can actually be kind of a catalyst for regeneration. So thinking about how that is, so they're not standalone assets. So again, for us, it's really thinking holistically about the problem. Russell came as well. It's what is the larger offer? What, you're not going to just go to your hotel and just sit there and experience just the immediate surroundings, but what is the larger RAC Tourism Authority, what has to offer, what else can you connect to, what else is your experience, and that's kind of really being an interesting debate and vision that has been talked about lately in some of the hospitality work that we've been undertaking. So I think really looking at the regional tourism offer is where our new work is kind of really coming from. Some of the, you have new Anantara developments happening in Ras Al Khaimah. You have new developments happening in Mina Al Arab. Those are really geared to the kind of international investors that are really coming up and just really buying a lot of those assets full stock. So I think the UAE's done a great job in terms of kind of being kind of the oasis during the pandemic, and that's really helped the brand value and really kind of attracted investment across the region. But it's really kind of looking at the interim catchment as well in terms of hospitality. So we're not getting only the kind of glitzy new hotels, but really the kind of more 3 stars, the kind of flexible assets that are a little bit more middle market as well, that they're looking to create a kind of renewed offer. I was just going to go back to what Scott was saying. Some of the business parks we have a couple projects happening in Riyadh. And one of the exciting things about that is really kind of building flexibility in at the onset. So even though the client might say, I have a certain kind of metric in terms of the amount of office space that he believes their tenants require, it's really about the kind of larger attractiveness really of kind of, being there and being and having connecting to the types of retail, the types of F&B that you might have there, the kind of flexible workplace, and all that kind of connecting with walkability and all that to immediate transport opportunities. So I think it's widening up the lens a little bit to say, okay, it's not just the building and the asset, but what is my surrounds? What are all the other things that I have on offer as well? And that's kind of creating the attractive and the compelling offer when we talk about projects.
There's one question here specific to the industrial sector. Industry is down because of COVID-19, but are you seeing industrial growth, construction growth in any of the industrial sectors? This is an open question to the panel. It's either a yes or no, but if you're seeing something, explain. Jason, jump in. Well, tell us what you're seeing.
The answer is yes, but it's at a master planning stage. So there are a number of really large scale master plan industrial precincts in master planning at the moment around the region, and they'll probably be in design for another 12 to 18 months before they go to construction, and then there's probably another 18 months of just utilities and infrastructure and plot development work that needs to be done, so that in 2 to 3 years' time there's going to be a huge volume of industrial plots available for development for companies then to start operating from. And I think that's on the basis of a regional view that the Middle East is still incredibly well located between massive population zones being, Central Asia and India, Africa, which is growing both in population and economically at a rapid rate, and Eastern Europe. So if industry can base itself in the Middle East, and cost of production is still reasonably attractive in the Middle East, then you've got an incredibly good location to service a large amount of the world's population. And so we're looking. It'll be interesting to see what the various GCC governments do to attract industry to the region. I know, KSA and a number of other countries are already putting sort of attractive offers out there for companies to relocate to the region, but we expect it to be a big growth area in the next few years. And it's going to take a while for these projects to come online anyway. So by the time industry arrives, I think the pandemic will be well and truly dealt with, and it'll be business as usual and off and racing.
Very good. There's a question here from an attendee today, specifically talking about 3D modeling and BIM and the designer fixing quantities, or I think the point here is that working with the design of a building, can it be replicated in other places to reduce cost? Is that an efficiency that we will see in the construction sector? I'm going to throw this straight over to Scott, because Scott, you and I have discussed this before. Are you seeing some of this activity in the world or in the region? Is there people talking about this consideration in design?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. There is a trend and a strong movement towards generative design and the use of basically computation to support the design process. I'm not talking purely about BIM. I'm talking about actual generative design, where you modify or you create a select number of parameters based on a plot of land and restrictions that may exist, whether that's related to fire codes or plot use or building restrictions in an area. And then using that, you are able to churn out and use a digital approach to actually work out what is the most pragmatic design solution. It's something Google have looked at, it's something Amazon have looked at. Actually, Google are rolling something out exactly for this, where they're really just processing big data and working out based on price predictions for steel, for aluminium, for glass, what might be the most efficient design based on a particular layout. It's one of the ways they are tackling housing challenges and the housing crisis in certain parts of the world as well, through 3D printing, through offsite fabrication, by being able to build in mass production of buildings. That can, and I say this, biting my tongue slightly as an architect, but it can be a bit of an architect's nightmare, because it's sort of, these cities of replication of, sort of these computer engineered monotony. But at the same time, it does answer some questions in relation to, how do we deliver buildings more efficiently and more effectively. I did have a look at the question there, and I saw, in part it relates to materials and more accuracy and pricing, which, should be the end goal really with the integration of BIM. And I believe, the uptake of BIM is starting to accelerate, if anything, during, throughout COVID and remote working. Sort of using platforms like BIM 360 has definitely accelerated, through the pandemic. And that's actually been a good change, a good driver there. So yeah, I think the integration of digital tools into the design process is inevitable.
Okay, did you see that other question just before that one from Amir in New York? Amir, thank you for joining us all the way from New York. I'm so glad that you could tune in to us. But does Aesg have any plans to enter the North American market? Amir wants to know.
At the moment, I think we've bitten off a good chunk of geographies that we are focusing on. We have been approached by some inquiries, and I think what we are looking to do is support on these projects, but from our existing sort of offices in both London and Dubai. At the moment, not necessarily Singapore. That's sort of covering a bit more of the Australasia market, but certainly London and Dubai. We are exploring some North America opportunities.
Okay, very good. Look, we could sit here and talk for another hour. I'm sure I really enjoyed talking to you guys. And I hope everyone that's listening is enjoying the discussion as much as I am. I have so many more questions that I'd love to ask you. I think we'll have to have you back again for another hour in the future. But I do want to recap and just sort of have a look at some of the regions. Qatar is a market that's moving ahead because of FIFA, where they're finishing off infrastructure works, they're finishing off buildings, they're still building for that event. And so the activity there is strong. I mean, no one's complaining about not having work in Qatar. In Saudi Arabia, where there's a lot of hope and promise, there's some mega developments. We are now starting to see some tender activity associated to those projects. Everyone asks me, what about the Red Sea? What about NEOM? These are major projects. And, 2 years ago, nothing was there. And they're building entire cities. There is so much construction activity work going on. And as it was discussed earlier, there is significant amount of design work. And now we're starting to see contracts for infrastructure. We're starting to see, the movement forward with building for labor accommodations. These things start. I think in the next couple of years, we'll start to see significant more activity in those regions, enough to be, seeing, major contract, major awards moving ahead. But between now and then, we will still see projects going forward. There was an article that I read today from Red Sea, where the airport is moving ahead and there are other activities. Things are progressing. Okay, so Saudi Arabia is on that progression mode, and people are active. People are talking about projects. Architectural designers like yourselves have been involved in project activity for more than 12, 18 months. That's fantastic. I look back to 2009 when we had the worldwide economic crisis. And at that stage, the King Abdullah city wasn't really in full mode. It was all planning, and we really didn't start to see the construction activity happen for another 2 years after that period of the decision being made to move ahead with building that activity in Saudi Arabia. And so it will take some time to walk through this design phase. I'd like to bring our discussion a little bit back to the UAE. Many joining us from the United Arab Emirates, and you talk to contractors today, they're not getting paid, they don't have enough work. It's pretty difficult for some of these contractors in the UAE. But then again, we start to see publications where, I'll just read something here. Danube Properties 2 days ago announced that they are moving ahead with $1.5 billion $1.5 billion dirhams in project activity. And I know Danube Properties, if they say they're going to do something, they do it, right? That's just that's their style. But what are you guys seeing as far as private development in the UAE? Are private developers talking to you about project activity? Is there hope? When do you think we will start to see some of the construction activity for these projects? Can we just go around the room? George, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a lot of interest. I think construction activity, I mean, a lot of it's about repurposing, as we said with Scott. So construction activity is almost kind of immediate. I mean, I think in the next, I would say 6 months, I think we're going to see a lot of momentum in that. And I think it's when the tourism market recovers, I think we're going to see a kind of the property market also recover and surge. So I think yes, I think in the next 4 to 6 months, I think absolutely we're going to be in that cycle.
Jason, what are you seeing?
Look, I honestly think that in terms of new project starts, we hit the absolute lowest of the low probably in the back half of last year, and there's a gradual increase in activity through 2021 for a number of reasons. Number one, ICD sort of taking over Nakheel and Maidan's real estate development pipelines and taking having a portfolio review and starting to work out what to do with some of those stalled projects is a really positive move, particularly for Dubai. And we're actually really interested to see sort of what comes of some of those projects that had, incredible potential, but for whatever reason didn't get there or started and stalled, and we'll have to potentially have a change in direction. But we expect that they will start to move forward again, particularly in design in the back half of this year, and then hopefully become fully fledged construction projects in 2022 and beyond. I think the other thing is that just the market segments that will be active in the near future are different. Dubai has an incredible amount of, I guess, what you would call luxury property and product on the market. And I think there's going to be, in the future, a lot of developers who realize that actually the affordable end of the market is where the volume is, and there isn't enough of that product actually available, and the mid-range as well. And I just think what we're starting to see and what we're expecting to continue to see is projects just pitched at those low to middle range market sectors, and that there are plenty of investors who've ironically made a huge amount of money through the pandemic and are ready to invest and have got their dollars ready to go. They just need the right product to invest in. We're expecting that will start through the back end of this year.
Do you think, Scott, developers are going to have the appetite for some of the mega projects in the UAE that we've seen in the past?
Well, I think we sort of touched on some of these earlier, but certainly in Abu Dhabi, there is a lot of these sort of nation building or sort of national identity projects, from sort of culturally significant projects or sort of museums and so on, particularly sort of around, sort of Sadia Island with the development of the Louvre now and Zayed Museum. And there's more of those basically to come. Morale is particularly busy in Abu Dhabi at the moment, and there's a lot of sort of exciting bits that should I think come up in the future from there. So I think we still will see some of these very exciting opportunities in these sort of more sort of iconic buildings. But I think beyond that, I would imagine that probably in Dubai, there will be more of a shift probably to where the demand is at the moment, which is, I think, small villa, residential development, but large scale. There is definitely a strong demand there rather than, sort of staying in the high-rise residential tower. And that's definitely somewhere where we're seeing some movement. And at the same time, I think there's also, we're maybe likely to see a little bit more development in the public-private partnership space as well. That's somewhere where we've worked a lot in Bahrain in the past. That's somewhere where there's more and more picking up in Saudi, and perhaps even in the UAE as well, to look at sort of private involvement as well in sort of developing some of these projects. I think finally as well, in terms of sort of some of these purely private developers like Rizwan Sajan from sort of Danube Properties. I mean, obviously he's a very, very wealthy man, and I think I think it goes without saying that if there's an opportunity there, it might be up for the taking. And I think at the moment, given the competitiveness in the construction market, perhaps now is a good time to bite, and to if there's a development that's there to go up now, maybe a very cost-effective time to get something like that going and get the contract signed. So I could probably see that as well, from the private developer's point of view.
I went to the Danube Properties office in Dubai mid last year, in the midst of COVID-19. It was such a buzz, that whole office. It was really quite impressive. It's great to see developers like that still in the UAE pushing ahead, moving forward. And let's not also forget Sharjah. There's a significant amount of new project activity moving ahead with Arada and Shuruk's activity there. And so, I mean, throughout the UAE, there is activity, but we're definitely not seeing the volume of activity that we've seen in the past. But it's very comforting, guys, to hear your comments here that we are on the upward surge. And I think many of these projects will, be moving ahead. I'm quite confident that this next half of the year, we will see more construction award than in the first half of the year. And we can only hope that it will be to the expectations that were forecast at the beginning of the year. I think once we start to see that, then we will begin to see us move more strongly forward in this time of recovery. Well, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on our webinar today. I really appreciate your input, and I'm sure everyone that's joined us has. It's just so good to speak to professional companies that continue to move forward with excellent results. And we do wish you all the very best. And I'm sure that the rest of 2021 will be an excellent year for you. And keep safe. And thank you so much for joining us. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we said that we would keep our webinars to no more than 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we are 1 minute over that. So I do apologize, but it's been so good for you all to join us. We really appreciate your support. So many more questions have been sent in to us. We just didn't get a chance to get to them all. I think that's because George likes talking too much, but other than that, no, I'm joking, George. I'm really joking. I told George the only way to stop a Greek talking is to tie up his hands so he can't continue. But you're not a hand mover, George. So
yeah, well, yeah.
Very controlled there, but we really appreciate
that's the advantage of
coming on board.
Digital events. Yeah, no many hands.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Anyway,
so we will send, if we have a comment to any question that's been raised from the participants today, we will send that to you. We will update you. We'll send you an email with an answer to your question. If it's something specific for the panel, we'll get them to support in that as well. But I really appreciate you all joining us. Lots and lots of questions about specific numbers associated to the market. We didn't want to get bogged down with specific numbers, but what I can tell you is that Ventures Onsite is a construction intelligence platform. And Ventures Onsite has been in operation here, providing construction information, construction reports for I'll say more than 15 years. I think it's like 20 years. And the construction industry platform, the intelligence platform that Ventures Onsite has, contains detailed information about projects and associated stakeholders for each project. So the Ventures Onsite platform reports on the architect, the developer, the contracting company, when it's at tender, when, all different stages of the project. And with access to this information, you have this incredible ability to generate reports and know specifics about projects for you to really push forward and market your products to and understand in great detail what's going on in the marketplace. So if you haven't been introduced to the Ventures Onsite intelligence platform, reach out to us, and we would be more than pleased to explain how that service can benefit your company. So with that, I thank you all for joining us. I do wish you all the very best. Keep safe, and we look forward to you joining our next webinar, where we will take a closer look at what's happening in the mega projects in Saudi Arabia. And so that will be a big one, and it'll be the beginning of the end of the third quarter this year. So we'll keep you updated with when that will be. So thank you all so much for joining us. We do wish you all the very best. Take care.
Thanks.
Goodbye.